The Galactic Senate building was the largest structure ever built. It floated in space, far from any star, a massive ring of metal and glass where every intelligent species in the known universe sent their representatives. For 12,000 years, this place had been the center of everything. Wars ended here. Trade deals were signed here. The fate of entire planets was decided in these halls. Park had been coming to this place for 15 years. He was the human ambassador, a man of 52 years with gray hair at his temples and tired eyes that had seen too many arguments go nowhere. He stood at the human delegation's podium, a small platform near the back of the great chamber. The human seats had always been near the back. They were new here, after all, only 300 years since first contact. In galactic terms, humanity was still a baby learning to walk. Behind him sat his team, was his senior aide, a woman in her 30s who kept perfect records of every vote, every speech, every insult disguised as diplomacy. Next to her was Old, the counselor who had served longer than anyone. She was 93 years old now, her hair white as snow, but her mind was still sharp as a blade. The chamber was loud today. The insect-like were clicking and buzzing in their section, their translators turning the sounds into words that echoed through the hall. The tall beings with 4 arms and skin like polished stone were gesturing angrily at some minor trade dispute. They floated in their containment spheres, clouds of living gas that had existed for 1,000,000 years and considered everyone else to be children. Today's vote was about humanity's request to expand into the outer reach, a region of empty space where they wanted to build new colonies. It was a simple request. The space was unused. No one else wanted it. Humanity had followed every rule, filed every document, waited in every line. High Arbiter called the chamber to order. She was a crystalline being, her body made of living glass that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. She had led the Senate for 2 centuries and would likely lead it for 2 more. Her voice rang out clear and cold. The motion before us today concerns the human petition for colony rights in Sector 7G of the Outer Reach. All delegates have received the relevant documents. We will now vote. Park watched the numbers appear on the central display. The votes came in quickly. Against, against, against. The voted as a block, all 112 worlds rejecting the petition. The followed. The abstained, as they often did, considering themselves above such matters. In the end, the count was 847 to 1. Only humanity had voted for humanity. His voice showed no emotion. The motion fails. Humanity's petition is. The chamber will now move to the next item on the agenda. Park had prepared a speech. He had spent weeks writing it, polishing every word, practicing every pause. It was a good speech about cooperation and mutual respect and the value of new perspectives. He had believed, foolishly, that words might matter. He closed his folder and tucked it under his arm. Looked up at him with confusion in her eyes. "Ambassador, your response." "There will be no response." He turned and walked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet of the human section. One by one, the other delegates stood and followed him, gathered her things quickly and fell into step behind. Old rose slowly, her joints protesting, but she too began the long walk toward the door. Some of the alien delegates noticed. The ambassador, a large creature covered in hard shell, made a sound that the translator turned into laughter. "Look at the young ones, running away to cry. They will learn patience in another 1,000 years, perhaps." A representative waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. "Let them go. We have real business to discuss." The chamber returned to its noise and chaos. The next vote was called. Someone was arguing about shipping routes. Someone else was complaining about resource distribution. The same arguments that had been happening for. At the door stopped. She was the last of the human delegation, moving slowly because her legs were old and tired. She turned back to look at the chamber one final time. She had spent 40 years of her life in this place, fighting for recognition, begging for scraps of respect, hoping that tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow would not be different. She understood that now. "We will not return," she said. Her voice was quiet, but the translators picked it up and broadcast it through the chamber. A few delegates heard. Most did not. Those who heard did not care. The humans were always saying dramatic things. They were an emotional species prone to outbursts. They would calm down. They would come back. They always did. Walked out of the chamber and did not look back. 3 days passed. The Senate continued its work, debating and arguing and accomplishing very little as it had done for thousands of years. No one thought about the empty human seats. Empty seats were common. Delegates came and went. Species rose and fell. The Senate endured. On the 4th day, a trade official noticed something strange. A human cargo ship that was supposed to deliver medical supplies to one of their colonies had not arrived. He sent an inquiry and received a strange response. All human vessels recalled to Earth. No further shipments scheduled. He assumed it was a mistake. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. A military base waited for the human engineers who maintained their reactor systems. They did not come. A research station expected their human colleagues to arrive for a joint project. They did not come. Human doctors at frontier hospitals submitted their resignations. Human teachers at alien universities packed their belongings. Human workers on space stations finished their shifts and boarded ships heading home. At first, no one connected these events. The galaxy was vast. Communication was slow. Each species was focused on its own problems, its own concerns. Humanity had always been a small presence, spread thin across many worlds, doing quiet work that no one really noticed. Commander Ryu received his recall orders while patrolling the border of space. He was a military man, 45 years old, with a crew of 200 under his command. He read the message 3 times to make sure he understood. All vessels returned to Sol system, no exceptions, no delays. His navigation officer, Lieutenant Han, looked up from her console. "Commander, is something wrong?" Stared at the message for a long moment. He thought about his years of service, the countless patrols, the times he had protected alien ships from pirates and received not even a thank you in return. He thought about his father, who had served before him, and his grandmother, who had been among the first humans to venture beyond their home system. "Nothing is wrong," he said finally. "Set a course for Earth, maximum speed." "Sir, our patrol schedule is no longer our concern." He looked at his crew, these young men and women who had spent their lives serving a galaxy that did not respect them. "We are going home." Across 1,000 stars, human ships turned toward Earth. Quietly, without fanfare, without announcement, humanity began to withdraw from the galaxy they had tried so hard to join. And no one noticed until it was too late. The first month after humanity's departure was quiet, too quiet, but no one in the galaxy seemed to understand why. The administrator reviewed the weekly trade reports with growing confusion. 17 major shipping routes were showing delays. Cargo was piling up at transfer stations. Ships were sitting empty in docks because there were no crews to fly them. "Where are all the human captains?" he demanded of his assistant. "Gone, administrator. They have all returned to their home system." "All of them? That is impossible. There must be hundreds of them working our routes." 642 to be exact. All have resigned their contracts. All have left. Made an angry clicking sound. "Then hire replacements. There are plenty of species who can pilot a cargo ship." But there were not plenty of species who would work for the wages humans had accepted. There were not plenty of species who could keep old ships running with creativity and determination. There were not plenty of species who would travel to dangerous frontier worlds without complaint. Humans had filled those roles because no one else wanted them. Across the galaxy, similar problems were appearing. The Empire had the largest military fleet in known space. Their warships were legendary, able to destroy planets and conquer systems. But those mighty ships were built with human-designed reactor cores, and those reactors needed human engineers to maintain them. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, reading a report that made his 4 hands shake with anger. "What do you mean, the engineers are gone?" "They have returned to Earth, Admiral, all of them. We received their resignations yesterday." "Resignations? They cannot resign, they are under contract." "The contracts allowed for departure with proper notice. They gave notice 6 months ago. We did not respond to their requests for renewal discussions, so they assumed the contracts were ending." Remembered those requests now. His staff had brought them to him and he had waved them away. Why would he negotiate with humans? They should be grateful for the opportunity to work on vessels. They should feel honored. Now his reactors were running at 80% efficiency and dropping. Without human engineers, no one knew how to fix them. On Earth, the return was carefully organized. Director of the Global Research Initiative, had spent 3 years planning for this day. She stood in her office in Seoul, watching the screens that showed human ships arriving in the Sol system from every corner of the galaxy. "How many today?" she asked her assistant. 412 vessels, Director. We expect another 300 tomorrow." "And the resettlement programs?" "Running smoothly. Every returning citizen has housing, employment, and support services waiting for them." Nodded. This was the part no one in the galaxy understood. Humans had not left in anger or desperation. They had left with a plan. Every person who returned had a place in the new society being built. Every skill they had developed among the stars would be put to use at home. 2 weeks later, she stood before the United Nations General Assembly. The Great Hall was full. Every nation had sent representatives. The whole world was watching. "For 300 years," began, "humanity has been a member of the galactic community. We have worked hard to prove ourselves. We have shared our knowledge freely. We have asked only for respect in return." She pressed a button, and the screen behind her lit up with data. Charts and graphs and lists that told a story most humans had never fully understood. "These are our contributions to galactic civilization. The fusion reactors that power warships, human design, the crop modifications that feed colony worlds, human development, the atmospheric processors that made 12 planets habitable, human engineering, the medical techniques that extended across 100 species, human research." The assembly was silent. Many of them were seeing these numbers for the first time. "We gave these gifts freely. We asked for nothing except a seat at the table. We were told to be patient. We were told we were too young, too new, too unimportant. We waited and worked and hoped." Her voice hardened. "We are done waiting." The announcement that followed sent shockwaves through the galaxy. All technological sharing agreements were suspended. All patents were revoked. All support contracts were terminated. Every piece of human knowledge that had been given to other species was being taken back. The reaction from the alien civilizations was swift and angry. The ambassador sent a furious message demanding that humanity resume its obligations. The emperor threatened war. They issued a statement calling humans childish and short-sighted. Ambassador O, who had spent his career building bridges between species, now had the job of explaining humanity's position. He sat in his office in Geneva, taking call after call from alien leaders who could not believe what was happening. "You cannot do this," the High Council told him. "We have treaties, we have agreements." "All of which included clauses for termination," replied calmly. "Clauses that your own lawyers insisted upon, as I recall. You wanted the freedom to end our relationship whenever it suited you. Now that freedom works both ways. This is betrayal. No, this is consequences." The Emperor was more direct. "If you do not resume maintenance of our fleet reactors, we will consider it an act of war." Sipped his tea before responding. You may consider it however you wish, but I would remind the Emperor that those reactors were designed by humans, built by humans. We know every system, every weakness, every. Are you certain you want to go to war with the people who built your weapons?" The Emperor ended the call without responding. Back on the food shortages began 3 months after humanity's departure. The crop modifications that had made their agriculture so productive needed regular updates and maintenance. Without human scientists, the modifications were failing. Yields dropped by 20%, then 30, then 40. For the first time in history, people went hungry. Not because of war or disaster, but because they had never learned to grow their own food without help. Professor Shin watched these developments from her office at Seoul National University. She was a historian, and she had spent her career studying how civilizations rose and fell. What was happening now was not new. It had happened many times before. They became dependent, she explained to her students. Every great empire does this eventually. They stop learning. They stop growing. They let others do the hard work while they enjoy the benefits. And then when those others leave, they discover they have forgotten how to survive. A student named raised his hand. "Professor, will they learn?" Shin thought about the question for a long moment. Some will, the smart ones, the humble ones. They will look at what happened and ask themselves hard questions. Others will not. They will blame us, hate us, try to take from us what they can no longer ask for. She smiled sadly. That is why we must be ready for both. Outside her window, the sun was setting over a world that had finally chosen itself. For 300 years, humanity had looked to the stars for acceptance. Now they were looking inward, and they were discovering that they had been strong all along. They had just needed a reason to believe it. 6 months after humanity left the Galactic Senate, the truth became impossible to ignore. The galaxy was falling apart and no one could stop it. The Empire had built its power on military strength. Their fleet was the largest in known space, with thousands of warships capable of destroying entire planets. For centuries, other species had feared them. They took what they wanted and dared anyone to stop them. Now their ships were dying. Engineer Specialist had worked on vessels for 12 years before the recall. She had maintained their reactor cores, fixed their engines, and kept their weapons systems running. She had done this work well, and they had never once thanked her. They had never asked her name. To them, she was just another human, useful but unimportant. Now she sat in her apartment reading reports about the fleet with something that might have been satisfaction. "Reactor efficiency down to 60%, she read aloud to her husband, Lee. "They are trying to train their own engineers, but they do not understand the systems. They never bothered to learn." Looked up from his book. "Do you feel bad for them?" Thought about the question. She remembered the long hours, the poor food, the tiny quarters she had been given while officers lived in luxury. She remembered the way they had looked at her when they bothered to look at all, like she was a tool, like she was furniture. "No," she said, "I do not feel bad for them." On the situation was even worse. The insect-like species had built their civilization on conquest and trade. They had taken control of over 100 worlds, not through war but through economic power. They controlled the food supply, the shipping routes, the markets. Other species depended on them for survival. But they themselves depended on human crop modifications. For 200 years, human scientists had improved their agricultural systems, making them more productive, more efficient, more resistant to disease. They had accepted these improvements without question. They had never learned how the modifications worked. They had never thought they needed to. Now their crops were failing. The modifications were breaking down without regular updates. Harvests that once fed billions were producing half their normal yield. On the outer colonies, people were starting to starve. High Chancellor addressed his council with fear in his compound eyes. "We must do something. Our people are dying." "We have tried to contact the human scientists," his advisor said. They will not respond to our messages. Then we will make them respond, send soldiers to Earth, bring them back by force. The advisor hesitated. High Chancellor, our military ships are not fully operational. The reactor systems were designed by humans. Without their engineers, our fleet is functioning at less than 50% capacity. His mandibles clicked in frustration. Then what do you suggest? No one had an answer. Far from these failing empires, a philosopher named Consciousness of Deep Waters floated in his containment sphere and thought about time. They were the oldest species in the galaxy, living clouds of gas that had existed for 1,000,000 years. They had seen civilizations rise and fall. They had watched empires come and go. They considered themselves above the petty concerns of younger species. But even though we're beginning to worry, their atmospheric processors were breaking down. These machines had been built by humans 2 centuries ago, designed to keep planets habitable. They had never learned how they worked. Why would they? They had better things to think about. Philosophy, art, the nature of existence. Such practical matters were beneath them. Now those practical matters were threatening their survival. Without the processors, their worlds would become toxic within decades. Their entire species could be wiped out by a problem they had considered too boring to understand. On Earth, Doctor received daily reports about the galactic situation. She read them carefully, noting which species were suffering and why. It was not pleasant reading. Billions of beings were struggling because of humanity's withdrawal. Some part of her felt guilty about that. But another part of her remembered all the times humans had been dismissed and ignored. She remembered the votes that went against them for no reason except prejudice. She remembered the insults, the condescension, the assumption that humans were inferior simply because they were new. We did not create this situation, she told her staff. They created it by becoming dependent on us while treating us like servants. We simply revealed the truth they refused to see. Her assistant, a young man named, looked troubled. But people are dying, Director. Is this really the right thing to do? Was quiet for a long moment. Do you know what would have happened if we had stayed? We would have continued to serve them. Our best scientists would have spent their lives improving alien crops while Earth's farms struggled. Our best engineers would have maintained alien ships while our own fleet rusted. Our best doctors would have healed alien patients while human children went without care. She shook her head. We were not partners. We were servants. And servants eventually either break free or break down. We chose to break free. Ambassador O had similar conversations every day. The alien diplomats who contacted him were no longer angry. Now they were pleading. We will give you anything, the ambassador said. His voice had lost its arrogance. Colony rights, trade concessions, seats on the High Council, name your price. You had 300 years to offer us these things, replied. You chose not to. We made a mistake. We were foolish. We did not understand your value. And that is the problem, leaned forward in his chair. You should not value us because we are useful to you. You should value us because we are people, because we have dreams and hopes and feelings, because we matter not as tools but as beings. He paused. Until you understand that, there is nothing to discuss. The ambassador's image flickered. Then teach us, help us understand. That is not our job. It never was. General watched the galaxy's problems from Earth's Strategic Command Center. His screens showed troop movements, fleet positions, and economic data from across known space. The picture they painted was grim. The hegemony was fracturing. Colony worlds were rebelling against angry about food shortages and government failures. Civil war was coming, and no one could stop it. The Empire was pulling back its fleets, unable to project power with crippled ships. Smaller species that had lived in fear for centuries were suddenly finding their courage. Border conflicts were erupting everywhere. Even the ancient were in crisis. their philosophers arguing endlessly about what to do while their worlds slowly died. "They are destroying themselves," said to his intelligence officer captain. "Yes, General, but some of them are also learning." She pulled up a different report. A few species, the smaller and humbler ones, had responded to humanity's withdrawal differently. Instead of demanding or threatening, they had asked questions. How do these systems work? Can we learn to maintain them ourselves? Will you teach us, not as servants, but as students? These species were struggling too, but they were also growing. They were learning skills they had never needed before. They were becoming stronger. "That is what we hoped for," said quietly. "Not destruction, change." Nodded. "The question is whether enough of them will change before it is too late." Outside the command center windows, Earth turned slowly in the darkness of space. A small blue world that had once dreamed of belonging to something larger. Now it was learning to stand alone. And somehow, standing alone felt better than begging for acceptance ever had. 9 months after humanity's withdrawal, the Civil War began. It started on a colony world called Harvest 7, where the food shortages had become unbearable. The local governor refused to share supplies with the starving population. The population refused to keep starving. What followed was brutal and swift. The governor was overthrown. The colonial government was dissolved. And for the first time in history, subjects rose up against their masters. The rebellion spread like fire through dry grass. Within weeks, 30 colony worlds had declared independence from the hegemony that had dominated galactic trade was tearing itself apart. High Chancellor ordered his military to crush the rebellions. But his military was a shadow of what it had been. Ships that once patrolled vast territories were now stuck in dockyards, their human-designed systems failing one by one. Soldiers who had never faced real resistance discovered that hungry, desperate people fought with nothing to lose. On Earth, General watched the reports with a heavy heart. He had spent his career preparing to defend humanity from alien threats. He had never imagined that humanity's greatest weapon would be simply walking away. 14 million dead, his intelligence officer reported. That number will grow. "I know," closed his eyes. "This is not what we wanted." "No, sir, but it is what they built. We did not cause this. We only revealed what was already broken." The response was different. The emperor, a proud warrior named the 20th, refused to accept that his empire was weakening. He had ruled for 80 years with an iron fist. He had never known defeat. He would not accept it now. "We will take what we need," he declared to his war council. "The humans have technology we require. We will go to their world and claim it." His advisors exchanged worried looks. "Emperor, our fleet is not at full capacity. The reactor systems are sufficient. We still have 300 capital ships. Earth has perhaps 50. The numbers are in our favor." "But Emperor, the humans designed our reactors. They know." "Enough," slammed his 4 fists on the table. "I will not be lectured about humans. They are weak. They are cowardly. They ran away rather than fight. Now they will face strength." The invasion fleet launched 2 weeks later. 300 warships, carrying 500,000 soldiers, heading for Earth. It was the largest military operation in history. The Emperor himself commanded from his flagship, eager to personally oversee humanity's defeat. Admiral Song received the news calmly. She was 60 years old, a veteran of border patrols and pirate hunts. She had never commanded in a real war. Now she would face the mightiest military force in the galaxy with a handful of ships. "How many do we have?" she asked her staff. 47 capital ships, Admiral, 200 support vessels, all fully operational. "And their fleet status?" "Long-range scans show their reactors running at approximately 40% efficiency. Their weapons systems are degraded. Their shields are unstable." Nodded slowly. "They do not know what we put in those reactors, do they?" "No, Admiral, they never asked." When humanity had designed the reactor cores for ships, they had included several features that were never documented. Safety systems, emergency protocols, that could be activated remotely if necessary. They had never noticed. They had been too proud to read the fine print. The invasion fleet was 1 week from Earth when Admiral transmitted a single coded signal. On every ship, every reactor, the emergency shutdown protocol activated simultaneously. It was not sabotage. The reactors were not damaged. They simply entered a safe mode that reduced output to 10%. Enough power for life support. Enough power for communications. Not enough power for weapons, shields, or faster-than-light travel. 300 warships stopped dead in space, drifting helplessly between the stars. Emperor stared at his bridge displays in disbelief. What is happening? Why have the engines stopped? His engineers scrambled to find an answer, but there was nothing they could do. The systems that controlled the reactors were locked. The codes that might override them were buried in human databases on Earth. The mighty fleet was now a collection of floating metal coffins. Admiral opened a communication channel. Her face appeared on every screen in the fleet. "Emperor," she said calmly, "your ships are disabled. Your weapons are offline. Your life support will last approximately 3 weeks at current consumption rates. You have 2 options." His image appeared on her screen, his face twisted with rage. "This is treachery. You have sabotaged our vessels. We designed your vessels. We built safety systems into them. Systems you would have known about if you had ever bothered to ask." His voice remained level. "Your first option, we send rescue ships to escort your fleet back to space. Your people return home safely. Your ships can be repaired, though not by us. And the second option, you remain where you are. In 3 weeks your life support fails. 500,000 soldiers freeze to death in the void between stars." She paused. "Choose." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. His 4 hands clenched and unclenched. His entire life, he had been told that we're the strongest, the bravest, the best. Now a species he had dismissed as weak and cowardly held his life in their hands. "You would not let us die," he said finally. "You humans are too soft for that." "Perhaps," agreed. "But are you willing to bet 500,000 lives on that belief?" Looked away from the screen. Around him, his bridge crew waited in terrified silence. They had families on the... They had children who would grow up without fathers. They had mothers who would never know what happened to their sons. "Send your rescue ships," the Emperor said quietly. The humiliation of the fleet sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The mightiest military power in known space had been defeated without a single shot fired. Humanity had not needed weapons. They had only needed patience and foresight. On Station Meridian, the Galactic Senate convened an emergency session. For the first time in living memory, the chamber was not filled with confident voices and casual arrogance. The delegates spoke in whispers. They looked at the empty human seats with something new in their eyes. Fear. High Arbiter called the session to order, but her crystalline body was dim. Its usual rainbow light faded. "We must discuss the human situation," she said. "Their withdrawal has caused unprecedented disruption. Their defeat of the fleet has changed the balance of power. We cannot ignore them any longer." The ambassador, once so proud, spoke with a broken voice. "Our hegemony is collapsing. 38 worlds have now declared independence. Our economy is in ruins. We need human help to survive." A representative floated forward in his containment sphere. "Our atmospheric processors are failing. Within 2 decades our worlds will be uninhabitable. We face extinction." One by one, the species that had dismissed humanity spoke of their problems. The galaxy that had functioned smoothly for 12,000 years was breaking down, and everyone knew why. "We must invite them back," someone said. "Offer them whatever they want." "They do not want our offers," replied. "We have tried. They say we do not understand." "Then what do they want?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. For 12,000 years, the powerful species of the galaxy had taken what they wanted without asking. They had conquered and traded and ruled without ever wondering if their way was right. Now, for the first time, they were being asked to think about someone other than themselves. And they did not know how. 1 year after humanity walked out of the Galactic Senate, High Arbiter did something no one expected. She came to Earth. Her crystalline body arrived on a small diplomatic vessel, alone except for a single aide. There was no fleet to protect her, no army to show strength. She came as a guest, asking for permission to land on human soil. President No received her in Geneva. The meeting room was simple: a wooden table, 2 chairs, a window that looked out over a park where children were playing. No grand halls, no displays of power, just two people talking. Had lived for 3,000 years. She had led the Galactic Senate through wars and disasters and countless crises. She had seen empires rise and fall, but she had never felt as uncertain as she did now. "I do not know how to begin," she admitted. Her voice was soft, lacking the authority it usually carried. Was 62 years old. She had been a teacher before entering politics, and she still had a teacher's patience. Then begin with the truth. Was silent for a long moment. Her body flickered with colors that humans could not fully understand: shame, regret, something that might have been grief. "We were wrong," she said finally. "Not just about the vote on your colony petition, about everything. For 300 years we treated your people as lesser beings. We took your gifts and gave nothing in return. We ignored your voices and dismissed your concerns. We were cruel, and we told ourselves it was justified." Nodded slowly. "Why?" "Because that is what we have always done. The strong take from the weak. The old dismiss the young. The powerful use the powerless." Light dimmed further. "We never questioned it. We never thought there was another way. And now, our civilization is dying. The hegemony has collapsed. Civil war has killed over 100 million of their people. The empire has lost its military dominance and is facing rebellions on every border. Even my own people, though, are counting the years until our worlds become uninhabitable." She looked at with something humans rarely saw in alien eyes: humility. "You could have conquered us. You had the means. You knew our weaknesses better than we knew ourselves. Why did you not take revenge?" Stood and walked to the window. Outside, a little girl was throwing a ball to her dog. A simple scene, a peaceful moment. The kind of thing that happened every day on Earth and nowhere else in the galaxy. "Because that is not who we are," she said. "We wanted partners, not subjects. Friends, not servants. We wanted to be part of something greater than ourselves." She turned back to, "You never offered us that. You only offered us a chance to be useful until you found something better." "I understand that now." Colors shifted again. "What would you have us do?" "Learn." The word was simple but carried enormous weight. "Learn to see other species as equals. Learn to listen instead of command. Learn that strength is not the same as cruelty and power is not the same as worth." Sat back down across from the ancient being. "The galaxy you built was based on fear and exploitation. It was always going to fall apart. We just showed you how fragile it really was. Can it be rebuilt?" "That depends on you, on all of you." His voice softened. "We will not come back as servants. We will not accept less than full equality. But if you are willing to build something new, something better, we will help you learn how." The negotiations that followed took months. They were difficult and painful and often seemed impossible. Species that had dominated had to accept that their way had failed. Leaders who had never apologized for anything had to find the words to ask for forgiveness. Ambassador Park led the human delegation. He was the same man who had walked out of the Senate chamber 1 year ago. He had been silent then, but now he had much to say. "Partnership means equality," he told the assembled representatives. "It means listening to voices you used to ignore. It means sharing power you used to hoard. It means admitting that you do not have all the answers." The ambassador, representing what remained of his shattered hegemony, asked the question that was on everyone's mind. How do we begin? By asking, by listening, by learning. Park looked around the chamber. For 300 years you told us to wait, to be patient, to accept whatever scraps you offered. Now it is your turn to wait and learn and grow. New treaties were signed. New agreements were reached. Humanity would return to the galactic community, but not to their old seats at the back of the chamber. Their delegation would sit at the center now. Their voice would carry weight. More importantly, the old rules were being rewritten. Species that had been ignored were given representation. Decisions that had been made by a few powerful empires would now involve everyone affected. The galaxy would no longer be ruled by strength alone. Doctor resumed her work, but with new conditions. Human technology would be shared again, but this time with proper credit and fair compensation. Other species would be taught to understand and maintain the systems they used. Dependency would be replaced by capability. "We are not giving you fish," she explained to a group of scientists who were learning to modify their own crops. "We are teaching you to fish. The knowledge will be yours. The power will be yours. What you do with it is up to you." Professor Shin began teaching at a new institution, the Galactic Academy for Cross-Species Understanding. Her students came from dozens of worlds. Some were young and eager. Others were old and set in their ways. All of them were trying to learn a lesson that should have been obvious from the beginning. "Every species has value," she told them. "Every voice matters. Every being deserves respect. These are not human ideas. They are universal truths. We simply remembered them when others forgot." Old Counselor, the woman who had spoken those 5 quiet words that changed everything, lived long enough to see the new order taking shape. She was 95 now, confined to a wheelchair but still sharp and still watching. A journalist came to interview her in her home inn. The house was small and simple, surrounded by a garden that had tended herself for decades. "You are being called the mother of the new galaxy," the journalist said. "Your words started all of this. How does that feel?" Laughed softly. "My words did nothing. They only revealed what was already true. The galaxy was built on a lie, the lie that some beings are worth more than others. All I did was refuse to pretend anymore." "Do you think the new order will last?" She thought about the question for a long moment. Outside her window, the sun was setting over the ocean. The same sun that had risen over this island for billions of years. The same sun that would continue rising long after she was gone. "Nothing lasts forever," she said finally. "But some things are worth building even if they will not last. Kindness, respect, equality, these are not just words. They are choices we make every day. The galaxy is learning to make better choices. That is enough." The journalist had one more question. "What would you say to the aliens who treated humanity so badly for so long? The ones who ignored you and dismissed you and took everything you offered without thanks?" Smiled the same gentle smile she had worn throughout her long career in politics. "I would say what I have always said. We are here. We are real. We matter. And now, finally, you understand why." 1,000 years later, historians would write about the day of silence, when humanity walked out of the Galactic Senate and the universe held its breath. They would call it the Great Reckoning, the moment when an ancient order fell and a new one rose from its ashes. But the humans who lived through it had a simpler name. They called it the day they taught the galaxy to say thank you. And in the end,